Today, we're going to talk about Greenland, but probably not in the way you'd expect. We're digging into some fascinating research that reveals just how fragile its modern society really is, how it all hangs by a very, very thin digital thread. All right, let's get right into it.
Okay, so let's just imagine a scenario. You wake up tomorrow and poof, the two undersea cables connecting Greenland to the world are cut. The satellite backups have failed. What actually happens? What keeps working? Well, the reality is pretty startling. Instantly, the healthcare system would just plunge into crisis. I mean, think about it. All the patient records, the lab results, that's all in the cloud. So doctors and nurses would essentially be flying blind. Then the economy would just seize up. Because all the payment systems are routed through servers somewhere else, every single credit card transaction would fail. ATMs would just become dead boxes. Commerce would grind to a complete halt. And it doesn't stop there. Government services, everything from managing cases to just getting people paid, would go offline. And schools, which rely on all these international learning platforms, would be totally cut off. So, let's go back to that original question. What would still function? The research puts it very bluntly. The uncomfortable answer is very little. This isn't just some major inconvenience we're talking about. It's a potential societal breakdown. So how did things get this bad? Why is Greenland so vulnerable? The whole answer is buried in its digital infrastructure. And to really understand the problem, we kind of have to peel back the layers and see who's actually controlling the systems the country runs on. This brings us to a concept that's becoming more critical every single day: digital sovereignty. It's basically a nation's ability to control its own destiny in the virtual world. It's not just about having internet, it's about having control over the very systems that make your country work. Now, the source material breaks this down into three core pillars. First, there's infrastructure. Think of these as the digital roads and ports, like cables and data centers. Second is data, which is, the strategic resource of our age. And third, you've got platforms, those global apps and services that have become our digital town squares and our offices. The problem is, Greenland is lacking real control in all three areas. The research uses a great metaphor for this: the digital onion. At every single layer you peel back, from the apps you use every day right down to the fundamental way data is routed, Greenland depends on the outside world. Get this, there's no domestic internet exchange. That means an email from one office in the capital Nuuk to another office right across the street has to travel thousands of miles abroad and then come all the way back again. It's wild. But hey, don't just take my word for it. The research provides some incredibly stark data that really quantifies this dependency. Let's take a look at the numbers. I'm just going to throw a number at you: 57%. What do you think that could possibly refer to? That is the share of Greenland's own public sector websites and services that physically live on servers in the United States. More than half of its digital government is anchored in a single foreign country. And this chart just lays it out so clearly. You can see the US bar at 57%, just towering over Greenland's own local hosting, which is down at only 26%. Denmark comes in third, so the bottom line is that Greenland's digital front door isn't even in Greenland. Now, if you think web hosting is lopsided, just look at email. This is the absolute backbone of communication for government and business. And look at this: Microsoft, Amazon, and Google completely dominate. Greenland's own national telecom, Tusas, is just that tiny 3% sliver. Let that sink in. Nearly 70% of all email in Greenland, government, municipal, commercial, is controlled by just 3 American tech giants. That is a staggering amount of concentrated control. The research summarizes it perfectly. Greenland's digital backbone is not in Greenland. It's a really sobering realization, and it has massive implications for the country's resilience and its sovereignty. So the situation is precarious for sure. But the good news is the research doesn't just point out the problem, it also proposes a concrete blueprint for how Greenland can start to reclaim its digital future. The core idea here is to build what's called an island mode. It's the ability for critical services to keep functioning even if the outside world is cut off. This involves practical steps like creating a national internet exchange to keep local traffic local, building a sovereign gov cloud for essential data, and even mandating these resilience requirements by law. Of course, none of this is simple. Take that idea of a national IXP. The pros are huge for resilience and performance, but the cons are real too. It costs a lot of money up front, it requires real political will, and it's complicated in a market with only one big telecom provider. It's a classic trade-off between today's cost and tomorrow's security.
And this really brings us to the bigger picture. Because Greenland's challenge isn't unique at all. It's actually a microcosm of a global struggle for digital self-determination that's happening everywhere. You see, the world is increasingly dividing into these so-called digital empires. You've got the US model driven by market-led tech giants. Then there's the Chinese model of state control, and the European model, which tries to project power through regulation. Small nations like Greenland have to figure out how to navigate these massive forces to carve out their own space. And this is the key takeaway here. The objective isn't to build a digital wall around Greenland. It's about building managed resilience. It's the practical ability to make sure that the government, healthcare, and finance can keep serving citizens even when the connection to the global internet is completely severed.
So, this whole situation in Greenland leaves us with a critical question for the 21st century. In a world dominated by just a few digital superpowers, how does any small nation truly build and own its digital home? It's a question of survival, of sovereignty, and really, of the future of the internet itself.